Ukraine is taking the war into Russia. Their weapons of choice are drones. Kyiv conducted fresh attacks today. Their biggest assault on Russia since the war began. Ukraine struck 6 regions in Russia, and with each strike, they're trying to break Russian defenses and penetrating deeper into Russia. In today's operation, they reached as far as 600 kilometers inside Russian territory. It was one of Ukraine's most daring missions yet. What do they hope to achieve with this? Can drones change the trajectory of this conflict? That's our lead story tonight, and we'll start with some pictures. These are from the Pskov region. Russia has an airport here. Last night, it was targeted by Ukrainians. Their drones destroyed multiple military planes. Going by one claim, 2 planes burst into flames. And what kind of planes are these? Transport planes used by the military. Pskov is nowhere close to Ukraine. It is more than 600 kilometers into Russia. It falls closer to the Estonian border. And this was not the only target. 5 more regions came under attack. Oryel, Bryansk, Ryazan, Kaluga, and the Moscow region. Russia declared that it will hit back.
The actions of the Ukrainian regime will not go unpunished. Russian law enforcement structures are investigating and properly documenting all facts of shelling by Ukrainian militants of Russian regions and their other criminal actions.
And they did. Moscow launched drones and missiles towards Kyiv. It was Russia's biggest bombardment in months, but it was not effective. Ukraine's air defenses managed to drown all 28 missiles fired by Russia, also 15 out of the 16 Russian drones that came their way. And yet there were casualties. At least 2 people died in Ukraine. They were struck by the falling debris. From the looks of it, this is going to get worse. So expect more attacks in the coming days. Because Ukraine's drone war is intensifying, Kyiv never takes credit for these strikes. But they never deny their involvement either. Look at this map. It shows all the drone attacks Russia has suffered till early August. A large number of them happened near the border. Now look at the southern region, that's Crimea. This year, it has witnessed a high number of drone attacks. And that's not all. Drones have also targeted the Russian capital, Moscow. Also caused damage in central Russia. These strikes are disrupting daily life in the country. It happened today in Pskov. The airport here is used for civilian flights too. All flights from this airport were cancelled today, and that's not all. 3 other airports had to be closed, although that disruption was brief. At least 12 flights had to be diverted. And that is the idea, really, behind the use of drones. It puts pressure on ordinary Russians. Ukraine wants them to feel that the war has come to their doorstep. They want Russia to feel vulnerable. And drones prove to be effective in this pursuit. They're small, they're fast, and they can fly long distances. Plus, it seems Russian radars are unable to catch them. But that's the limited purpose they serve. Drone strikes will not lead to a Ukrainian victory. They will, at best, give them good headlines and expose the limits of Russian defenses. Off the record, Ukraine's military concedes that these attacks have a limited impact. What they do is impede Russian advances, slow down their forces, and offer a temporary advantage to Kyiv. When Moscow decides, it can muster the means to counter this. Putin has resourceful allies to fall back on, like the president of China, Xi Jinping. In fact, the Russian president is planning to visit China soon. He's got an invite from the Chinese president. In October, Xi Jinping is hosting the Belt and Road Forum, and Putin will attend the event in person. Why is this noteworthy? Because Putin has been a reclusive leader of late. Since the war began, he's traveled outside Russia only twice, once to visit Iran and the second time to some former Soviet states in Russia's neighborhood. He did not go to the BRICS summit in South Africa. He has also opted out of the G20 summit in India. In fact, on Monday, he called Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to inform him about this decision. Putin has not traveled overseas since March this year. That's when an arrest warrant was issued in his name. The International Criminal Court had found him guilty of war crimes. So Putin has become more selective about his travel plans. Reports say he's willing to visit only those countries where his security and safety is guaranteed. And clearly he deems China to be safe. His last visit to China was in February 2022, less than 3 weeks before he invaded Ukraine. That's when Putin and Xi declared a no-limits partnership. A Russia-China no-limits partnership. The relationship has only deepened since then. Putin is counting on support from Xi. both for the war in Ukraine and for the Russian economy. So far, Beijing's support has been largely diplomatic. Will the October visit change this? We'll be tracking it for you. So the war is escalating and spilling over. What does that mean? It means neither side is short of money. If you ask the West, they will blame India and China for it. We buy Russian oil, hence Putin's war chest keeps getting bigger. But turns out, Europe is doing the same thing. They're buying record amounts of Russian LNG. LNG is liquefied natural gas. Until last year, Europe imported very little LNG. Instead, they bought piped gas from Russia. But after the war came sanctions. European countries decided to stop buying Russian oil. How very noble. The brave Europeans sacrificing a comfortable winter to fight Vladimir Putin. But that's only half the story. After banning Russian oil, Europe started buying Russian LNG, and lots of it. I have some numbers for you. Europe's LNG imports from Russia are up 40%, 40, compared to 2021. And 2021 was before the war. During the same period, global imports from Russia have also increased. But that increase is only of 6%. Do you see the difference here? Global imports of Russian LNG increased by 6%, but European imports increased by 40%. And how much was this trade worth? Around $5.3 billion in 7 months. At this rate, Europe could spend $10 billion on Russian gas this year. Now, to give you some context, Russia's defense budget is around $100 billion, and Europe is paying 10% of that for Russian gas. So much for sanctions. Spain, Belgium, and France are the biggest buyers. France bought around 4.5 million cubic meters of Russian LNG, Belgium 7 million, and Spain around 7.5 million. Most of this gas is coming from a joint venture called Yamal LNG. It's a majority stake. In fact, its majority stake is being held by a Russian company called Novatek. The rest is spread globally. France's Total Energy has a stake. So does China's gas giant CNPC, and this trade continues to flourish. Imports are not just up compared to 2021, they are up compared to last year as well. There is an increase of around 2%, which means Europe's gas imports are not slowing down after 2022, they're gathering speed. In fact, Russia is the second biggest supplier of LNG to Europe. The first is America. Around 16% of Europe's LNG comes from Russia, from its own enemy. So why isn't Brussels doing something about it? Well, they say they have a plan. The plan is to phase out all Russian fossil fuels by 2027. Oil, piped gas, liquid gas, they will stop buying all of it by 2027. Until then, it's all fair. In March this year, Spain's energy minister highlighted this. She called the situation absurd. She also asked Spanish companies to not buy Russian LNG. It made no difference, though. And why would it? Energy companies will listen to laws. They will not listen to appeals and suggestions. So what is stopping Europe from sanctioning companies for buying Russian LNG? Just think about it. Russian oil is sanctioned. Russian coal is sanctioned. Even Russian cigarettes are sanctioned. But Russian LNG is free to use. Sums up Europe's hypocrisy. Their sanctions are at best half-hearted, filled with loopholes and backdoors. Just look at Russian crude. Europe says we don't want anything to do with Russian crude oil. We won't import or refine it. But what if other countries refine Russian crude and ship it to Europe? Well, then it's fine. Countries like India, China, and Turkey have been selling refined Russian crude to Europe. Europeans have been criticizing it. They have called for sanctions, but at the end of the day, they keep buying the same oil. It's like taking bribes. You won't take the money directly, but you'll take expensive gifts bought with that money. In reality, it's all the same. And don't get me wrong, Europe is free to buy whatever they want. Russian oil, Russian LNG, Russian vodka, anything they like. But to be honest, they have to get off the moral high horse and not criticize others who also buy from Russia. You may remember what Ukraine said. It said India had blood on its hands for buying Russian oil. By that logic, doesn't Europe also have bloody hands? You can't say one thing and do the other. But that is Europe's playbook. They have promised military aid worth $28 billion to Ukraine. I know it's a lot, but at the same time, they're also spending almost $10 billion on Russian gas. They're effectively funding Putin's war. The question is why? For starters, many European countries had elections recently. European energy prices were a big issue. So banning Russian LNG may have backfired then. It could have triggered an energy crisis. But that was last year. What's stopping them now? European gas storage containers are more than 90% full, so the winter is taken care of. Yet the Russian LNG imports keep rising, and don't expect anyone to question this booming trade. Because when Europe does it, it's a strategic choice. When others do it, it's blood money. So ISRO is achieving new milestones. Saudi Arabia too is forging new paths. Tonight we'll tell you about their next big bet, tennis. Riyadh has bought rights to host a major ATP event, the finals of the men's under-21 tournament. The hosting rights are for 4 years. The tournament began in 2017, and since then only Milan has hosted it. But ATP decided to do things differently this time, and ATP is the Association of Tennis Professionals. It's one of the main governing bodies of tennis. ATP launched a bidding process. Many cities were in the running. In the end, Jeddah came out on top. We don't know the value of the deal yet, but the prize money will be hiked. Earlier, the winner took home $1.4 million. This year, the champion will get $2 million. It's an attractive proposition. More prize money will draw the players, for sure. But not everyone is thrilled about it. As with any Saudi investment, this one too is not without its share of controversy. The deal is getting a mixed response. Some greats are skeptical, like Chris Evert. There were rumors that the women's championship could move to Saudi Arabia too, and this is what Chris Evert said. Obviously, they have the human rights issues and everything, just the way they treat women. I would be against it, but I don't have a vote. So there is some criticism, but it's unlikely to sway Riyadh. Saudi Arabia has big plans. It is betting big money on sports, and the list keeps getting longer. Riyadh's Sovereign Wealth Fund is the driving force behind these investments. It is called the Public Investment Fund, or PIF. It is worth $650 billion. One of its major bets is football. Saudi Arabia is propping up its own league, its own football league. It's called the Saudi Professional League. In June this year, the PIF bought 4 teams in this league. During the summer, the league spent more than $900 million, and this included transfer fees. They snapped up some big players, the likes of Neymar, Karim Benzema, Sadio Mane, and Jordan Henderson, and many others. And of course, we've not forgotten Cristiano Ronaldo. He was transferred in January, and his contract opened the floodgates. The Ronaldo deal alone is said to be worth over $400 million. These acquisitions made quite a splash and invited charges of sports washing. But football is not where the Saudi kingdom began. They've made more investments in Formula One. In 2021, Saudi Arabia hosted its first F1 race. Now this is an annual event. 1 year later, they bought stakes in an F1 team, the Aston Martin F1 team. Again, the money came from the kingdom's Sovereign Wealth Fund, PIF. The PIF picked up a 17% stake. Then we have golf. Again, the PIF took the lead. They created a tournament called Live Golf. Reports say it cost them $2 billion. Players were poached from the PGA and Europe. PGA stands for Professional Golfers Association, the biggest golfing body in America. When the Saudis created Live Golf, the West tried to fight back. Lawsuits were filed. Live Golf players were banned by the PGA. But that fight ended in June. A merger was announced. PGA, Europe's DP World Tour, and Saudi Arabia's Live Golf decided to come together. So the Saudis did not just win this battle, they ended up reshaping the world of golf. And Riyadh's muscle flexing is not limited to professional sports. They're also investing in video games. And they're aggressive on this front too. So far, Saudi Arabia has invested around $7.5 billion. They've picked up stakes in leading video game companies, the likes of Electronic Arts, Activision Blizzard, and Take-Two Interactive. So long story short, Saudi Arabia is now a powerhouse in the world of sports. Critics label these investments as sports washing. They say this is a smokescreen to distract from the kingdom's human rights record. But why spend billions of dollars to fix your reputation? Because their future may depend on it. The kingdom wants to use sports as a soft power, and Saudi Arabia won't be the first one to try to do this. Others have done it before them. And this approach has its advantages. Making these bold investments, Riyadh has captured the attention of the world. Major sporting events give the kingdom an international platform, a platform to showcase their culture and tradition. Sports can also be used as a vehicle for hard power. Case in point, India. It is a major cricketing power, also a big market for the sport. And this puts India in a unique position. The BCCI can throw its weight around when it comes to bilateral matches. Like in the case of Pakistan, India does not play any match with the Pakistani team. They face off only at ICC tournaments. And that's the power of sports, really. You can use it to achieve strategic and economic goals, which is what Riyadh is chasing. And at this rate, the juggernaut is hard to stop. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Madrid, thousands call for the resignation of Spanish football chief Luis Rubiales. Rubiales kissed Spanish national star Jenny Hermoso without her consent at the Women's World Cup final. Meanwhile, Spain is painting the town of Bunol red. The city marked the annual Tomatina festival, where revelers threw tomatoes at each other. And the month of August began with a bright supermoon. It is ending the same way as another one lights up the night sky tonight. This is the last super blue moon until 2037, so catch it while you can. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1967, the US Senate confirmed the appointment of Thurgood Marshall to the US Supreme Court. He became the first African-American justice in the top court. We're leaving you with that. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.